Again, now former Finance Minister Trevor Manuel says abuses by security forces should not be tolerated. He says many of their actions while enforcing the lockdown is in violation of the Constitution. In a recent article, he says the President, ministers and senior police and military officials should be taken to task for not calling out the behaviour. Well, let's chat to Trevor Manuel now, joining us via Skype this morning. Mr. Manuel, good morning, and thanks so much for your time. I want to ask you if you've seen the video coming out of Shaka's Rock that's doing the rounds on social media at the moment about where we see SAPS members and a family, a father and son. I'd like to know just what ran through your mind, if you have seen that video, when you actually saw that.
Iveka, I saw the video and I was shocked. At first I thought it was a spoof video. It's so bad. It's so bad that Metro Police would think that a little child is a threat to something, and that they believe it's their right to abuse a child like that and not allow the child's parent to intervene. It means that they are poorly trained, that they don't know what's required of them. And this is the kind of story that has played out across the country in a variety of different instances. I believe that it's down to training, it's down to the inability of seniors to explain what the purpose of the lockdown is. And I want to emphasize that the purpose of the lockdown is to prevent the spread of COVID-19. We don't have a security problem in this country, but if we allow the police and defense force to behave in the way that they do, then we will have a security problem.
Mr. Manuel, I hear what you're saying about they need to be instructed properly, and we did have the President saying at the beginning of this, urging them to go out and do their jobs with dignity and humility and to treat citizens like that. Now, what would you say to those who say, you know what, we really haven't been in a place like this despite our Constitution. It's a situation we are dealing with for the first time on both sides, whether you're a person in authority, whether you are a citizen. We have never been here before. In modern-day South Africa, that we're sort of learning as we go along. Is that a good enough explanation?
No, Iveka, I don't think that's a good enough explanation. My understanding of both the police and the defense force is that they have structures that allow for instructions to flow and for oversight to be exercised. So oversight may be exercised by a non-commissioned officer over, say, 6 or 10 officers in the field. That non-commissioned officer has an important responsibility. That is the link between the situation higher up, which may be commissioned officers, and the community. And if those links don't play out, then you get this kind of abuse. And what the story from Shaka's Rock is a story of abuse. But it's no different from an auntie near Baragwanath Hospital selling fat cooks and being arrested. It's no different from police with the minister going into a small shop in Soweto and arresting the manager for selling expired foods. That's not the purpose of the disaster management regulations. And if you don't have an attitude that says our primary responsibility is to prevent the spread of the disease, because one thing that we can't escape from is that COVID-19 is something that spreads very virulently. If left unchecked, by the end of this month, April, there'll be 3,000 new infections a day. And if that is left unchecked, by the end of June, there'll be 26,000 new infections a day. Now, as those infections spread, people who are more vulnerable fall very ill very quickly, and frequently it leads to their passing. That's what we must prevent. This is not a security situation, which is why I come back and say that the instructions given to the officers, the uniformed officers in the field, surely can't be correct for the purpose.
One could also maybe argue that this is individual behavior. Maybe these men or women who are wearing these uniforms are in that position of authority, don't quite know what to do in the moment. It's not entire groups of them who are acting this way. Do you think it comes down to having the wrong people in those jobs?
Yveka, I've thought about this because I grew up on a diet of a complete outrage about the behavior of apartheid police. What happened at Sharpeville, for instance, was that an instruction from anybody, or were those road police in uniforms with equipment acting against a community in Sharpeville? It's the same kind of thing. We must prevent these kinds of things from happening, and the only way to do it is to call them out when they happen and to plead, as I am doing, with those who are responsible to ensure that we prevent this and get the uniformed officers to act appropriately in the circumstances. It's a health issue and a health crisis that we're trying to prevent.
And Mr. Manuel, there are so many different avenues of thought here, and some might say, yes, like you say, this is about preventing COVID, and some might say, they might argue, this is what we need to do to keep South Africans alive. We're doing it for your own good. Your thoughts on that?
No, it's South Africans don't need to be kept in line. In fact, what is happening in the circumstances frequently is that there's a desperation. So leave aside what we saw in the video from Shaka's Rock yesterday. Talk about what happens in the SASA queues, where there ought to be social distancing, but there isn't. So why doesn't somebody examine how money can be sent to pensioners and recipients of grants quite differently so they don't have to queue bunched up and face the risk of disease? Or when food parcels are distributed. And you saw this in Lusiki, you saw it in Olivenhout, you saw it in Mitchell's Plain. There must be some other way of communicating. It's the takeouts from the experience and the way in which these takeouts are applied to ensure better behavior on the part of officials, because the focus has to be on disease prevention.
So if I hear you correctly, you're saying that we should not be using our soldiers and our cops to keep people in line mostly, but to see how we can best use them to service citizens, like you say, get soldiers to take the money, take it to the people who shouldn't be standing in a queue. Let them man the social distancing in that way. And I think a lot of the country has thought the same way over the past couple of weeks.
No, Yveka, I'm not saying that you get the soldiers to take the money to people. What I'm saying is,
to utilize them that way.
Sorry?
For example, to utilize them in that way, to ease the situation as much as we can as well.
No, it's fairly easy to reach people. In fact, I'm told that of all the grant recipients in the country, there's fewer than 1 million who go into queues. Everybody else receives their money via a message on their cell phone. So money is transferred directly into the bank. You've got to look at people who are not in that system and recognize that at a time like this, when we're trying to prevent disease, everybody must be jacked up and brought into line with the system. It means that social workers and other para-professionals be deployed into communities to help people, because we can't risk the bunching of people. And I'm saying the same kind of thing has occurred with the distribution of food parcels, because people are broke and they are hungry and they are poor, it's a very dangerous situation. And I think that those who are involved in the distribution need to be mindful of these realities as we try and get food to people.
All right. Mr. Manuel, I just want to change tack very quickly before I let you go. And it's about what you've had to say about e-commerce at the moment. And we know there have been lots of complaints about restrictions being placed on e-commerce. As a former finance minister, just your thoughts on what's happening and what should be happening.
Yveka, one of my concerns is that I can't find rationality. Somebody says to me that you can't buy flip-flops because it's summer shoes and you can't buy summer shoes now. Somebody else who I was in conversation with says his washing machine broke. He called up one of the large stores to get a washing machine, told you can't purchase a washing machine because of lockdown. Finds a mechanic to come and repair it. The mechanic comes in, can't get parts because of lockdown. Now, none of that is rational. I'm sure you would agree. E-commerce is one example of this, but there are so many things that don't actually make sense. I went into a mall on Saturday, bought groceries. There were stores that sell clothing, largely imported clothing, that are open, and a place that sells coffee is not allowed to open. Sell coffee to take home, not allowed to open. These are not rational kinds of decisions. And it's very important that when these regulations are passed, that they are tested for rationality. What are they doing? What are they preventing? What is the mischief that they're trying to cure? Would be the question that lawyers ask, and what is the consequence of applying those kinds of things? And I think that those in authority need to be careful about how these regulations are drafted, how they passed, and what the consequences would be. I mean, similarly, why do we have a curfew? And the curfew was announced one day at 8 p.m. Well, not many of us are out on the streets. The following week, there's a different gazette that says, no, it's now 7 o'clock. What is the purpose of this? Why 7? Why 8? Why not 8? And I said, as well, Iveka, exercise is good, but why 3 hours? Why not 4 hours? Can somebody explain what the purpose is of exercising only between 6 and 9 in the morning?
Yeah.
So all I'm pleading for is for those who take these decisions to actually understand that these have consequences in the lives of all of us as South Africans. And hopefully they would place themselves in the position of the governed and understand that rationality is an important part of government.
And I want to put you on the spot very, very quickly, and if you can tell me in just a few seconds on that thought of rationality, your thoughts on the alcohol and tobacco bans.
Look, I don't want to go into that because I think that the entire debate has been very polarized. It's even been racialized and so on. I don't want to go into that. I want to take a broader sweep and say, can we do things on the basis of rationality?
Okay, we'll leave it there for now. Thanks very much for that, former Minister Trevor Manuel, just talking to us on various issues and some shortcomings of conditions under this much-needed lockdown, this vital lockdown that we find ourselves in the middle of.